The day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Real quick, I'm going to put this flyer, this black and white flyer. For some reason, my computer did not want to print it out in color. But this is about the camp over Labor Day up at the church's camp. They do have some spots available for tents and trailers and motorhomes. Of course, it's a first come, first served basis. We don't have that many yet. They do have some bunk beds that we were able to get from the old camp, Princess Pine, set up, I think, in the trailer and in the big house, whatever you want to call it, the barn. But I'll set this up out there. If you have any questions, just ask me, and I'll see if I can't answer them for you. Today, totally off the subject I want to start with this morning, but this is the picture that I showed you back in October of the theoretical Big Bang Theory. And we discussed it back in October after Kathy and I had been down to lectureship down in Meridian, which is just outside of Boise. Fantastic weekend, jam-packed with information. Of course, I could only share with you just a small fragment of that. And I still encourage you to go out to the Linder Road Church of Christ and listen and watch those tapes if you haven't done so already, those recordings. But this is the Big Bang Theory, and supposedly when the Big Bang happened, which of course we talked about that you had to have matter in order to have a Big Bang Theory, and the big problem was, well, where did that matter come from? And they never could answer that. But when you had that Big Bang, everything from that point of origin expands out. And if you see up there on the right, it says accelerated expansion, because those were the things that were closest. The farther they get out, the faster they go, and they expand more. Well, I just saw this morning that I had to bring to you. And it is, the Big Bang Theory has been debunked. This just came out yesterday afternoon as of 2:05 p.m. And so I had to share this with you because of those series of lessons that we did. Now, science appreciators, and I just lost my notes. Science appreciators around the world have been pleased with the new images being produced by the James Webb Space Telescope. And I almost need to turn the lights off so we can see it a little bit better. But that's a big ring around this new area. Number one, the top left. But you can see, I mean, the images that they're getting from deep outer space are just amazing. You can just say, that's good. But this new highly advanced telescope has showcased images of the stairways that no one has ever seen before. While the public has been transfixed on how many new galaxies, stars, and more have been shown, it has caused a panic among the astronomers in their communities. One of the growing concerns, and I'm reading verbatim what this article said that I found this morning, but one of the growing concerns of these new images is that it has begun to produce papers that might be indirectly stating that the Big Bang Theory has been debunked, which would be massively heartbreaking for many people. Not us as Christians who believe in creation, who believe in the truth, but for all of these who believed in the Big Bang Theory. Many scientists have been studying these new images and determining evidence that has stood for many years. The Big Bang Theory essentially states that the universe began some 14 billion years ago in an incredibly hot and dense state that has been expanding ever since, which is what I was showing you on that first picture, that things that was around when the Big Bang occurred, getting pushed out farthest out, gain speed. And they expand more. And what they're seeing with these new telescopic pictures, that's not true. That's not what they're seeing out in these far expanses of the universe. However, the characteristics of the galaxies that are furthest away should be huge and contain a red skirt, whatever that is, a red shirt, to their light. What the James Webb Telescope has discovered is that these galaxies are the complete opposite. Imagine that. An astronomer at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Allison Patrick, spoke about this new evidence with great panic. According to Patrick, right now I find myself lying awake at 3 a.m, wondering if everything I have done is wrong. Well, Patrick, yes it is. I would be willing to sit down with you and discuss with you the truth of how everything created. It wasn't the Big Bang. It's called creation, you know. But like I said, this just came out yesterday, and I had to share it with you because of what we have talked about already about this theory, which is now being debunked. Okay, let's get on with this morning's lesson. I know I get sidetracked, but that was just something that I had to share with you. Once again, I had a different sermon picked for today. This is one I had decided on a month ago when we were talking about the demons and the devil, and I put it on hold, and I started working on it. And Wednesday, I came up with a new idea. I saw something else on the internet that kind of tied in with the study that we did on the devil, and so I put that one on hold again. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. But instead, I wanted to share this with you. And it's a different kind of lesson, and so I hope you'll bear with me. Before we get into it, I want to read a couple of scriptures. The whole chapter of John 10 deals with Jesus being the true shepherd and being the good shepherd, and how this shepherd knows his sheep and that the sheep know him. Now, I'm not going to read that whole chapter today, but I would encourage you to go and read John chapter 10 in its entirety. I'm only going to read 7 verses this morning. We're going to start in verse 24. Then the Jews surrounded him and said to him, "How long do you keep us in doubt? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." Jesus answered them, "I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me. But you do not believe, because you are not of my sheep, as I said to you. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. My Father who has given them to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one." But the point I want to bring out from this is that Jesus' sheep know his voice, and they follow that voice. In the first part of chapter 10, Jesus talks about how he goes to the sheepfold where they're all gathered. And when we talked about this before when we studied these verses, that when they came home, brought their sheep in from pastures that were farther out, they had like a big cage or a warehouse or a livestock place that they would bring them in and put them in. And when the shepherd would come back the next day or 2 days later to get his sheep, he could call them. And the sheep recognized their shepherd's voice, and they would come out of this flock of other sheep and gather with him, and he would take them back out into the pastures. And that was the example he was using, because these people are shepherds and they had sheep around them, and they recognized this. You know, Jesus always used parables and stories and everything that they understood. Okay? And so that's what he's saying. The sheep recognize the shepherd's voice. And that's important in this lesson or this story that I'm going to read to you this morning. I found this on the internet. It was a YouTube video. And I don't know if it's actual. It makes it sound like it is, or if it's a made-up story. It does not state, but it is a very good story regardless. I was in Alaska for a lawsuit. We were way out on the Aleutian Islands, which, if you know where the Aleutians, you see the pictures of Alaska, and there's that little strip of islands that come out and go west. Well, the tip of those Aleutian Islands are actually farther west than Hawaii. Okay, so that is the farthern western tip of North America, of the U.S. But that's where they were at, out on the Aleutian Islands. We're getting ready to fly back to Anchorage and then go home. I had a ticket in my pocket to get on an airplane. A pastor came up to me and said, "Hey, look, I could save you money." I said, "How's that?" He said, "I flew a small airplane up here and I could take you back on my little airplane and you could save your ticket to use it later." And this did not sound bad, and I replied, "Thank you very much, but I've got this ticket in hand." Well, just make your way on home, me and this other lawyer and me. He said, no, you got to do it. And against my better judgment, I said, okay. Now, how many times do we do that? How many times do we do that in our Christian life? You know, we decide, you know what, I'm not going to sin. I'm going to do what I need to do. But yet the devil comes back and says, no. This is better. This is easier. This is funner. Okay? This is, you would enjoy this more. And we say, you know what, you're right. And we do what the devil entices us to do. I said, okay. Well, we went out to the airport. The pastor took us by his little plane, and I looked at it, and I said, well, one good thing, it's shiny. You know, and that's how the devil, and we talked about that for the last 4 weeks, talking about how the devil looks and how the devil entices us. He's not going to entice us with a worn down, rickety old plane. He's going to bring in a nice, shiny one, isn't he? To make you feel good. Well, this is a good thing I'm doing. We always got to be careful of that, brothers and sisters. Then he walked around the plane. We got in. He was on the left front. I was on the right front, and the other lawyer was sitting behind me. The pilot started the plane up, and it started just fine. Well, we taxied out. I asked if we should pray. The pastor said, yeah, that would be a good idea, but we normally don't. I said, well, this time we are going to. I'm telling you that I prayed 5 to 8 minutes. I prayed a long time. We went and got out on the runway. He started down the runway, and the plane lifted off ever so gently. And we started climbing, and it was wonderful. Not a problem in the world. We started climbing, and we flew probably 3 or 4 minutes. And then something happened that will never leave my mind. The pilot turned to me. The pilot turned to me and he said, we're going into the clouds, and I can't fly in clouds because they make me pass out. I said, clouds make you do what? Now it had been cloudy all day long, and we go right up into the clouds, and you can't see anything. And he looks at me, and his eyes roll back into his head, and he starts mumbling, and he passes out. Passed out cold. I grabbed him, and I shook him, and I said, come on, wake up so I can kill you. Now, we were in the clouds flying along with no pilot, and my friend is in the back, and he starts asking me questions. And he says, we're dead, aren't we? I said, there's a very good chance of that, yes. He said, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know. But there was a radio right there, and I handed him the microphone, and I said, start asking for help. So he's in the back seat reaching up, and he said, hello, hello. We didn't know any proper radio etiquette. All he was saying was hello. And somebody answered back, hello, hello. Don't you guys know any proper radio etiquette? And I said, give it to me. I said, we don't know anything. Tell him we're in an airplane with a passed out pilot, and we don't know how to fly this plane. The guy said, I'm a freighter pilot flying out of Anchorage on the way to Tokyo. And he said, you're telling me that nobody who could fly that plane is with you. And I said, tell him that's correct. Now you just understand, I am sweating bullets by this time because I don't know what we're doing or what's going to happen. He said, the first thing I'm going to do is start circling so I don't lose you because I'll fly out of range of your radio, excuse me, and you won't have me anymore. Brothers and sisters, that's how we need to be as Christians. We need to recognize when one of our family is hurting, when one of our family is in distress, when one of our family needs help. And we need to not just say, okay, well, have a good day. No, we need to drop what we're doing, and we need to help our brothers and sisters who are in need. We need to recognize that problem, don't we? And we need to help each other. The other pilot said, well, I'm going to get Anchorage Emergency for you, and Anchorage Emergency will be the people that can help you. Try to save your life. After about 5 minutes, Anchorage came on and said, we understand that you have a passed out pilot, and those of you on the plane do not know how to fly. And we said, that's right. They said, well, the first thing we need to do is to find you. I'll never forget what this man at Anchorage said. He said, my job is to get you home safe. He said, that's my job. You know, we as Christians, we might not consider it as a job, but we do have a purpose as a Christian. And I've shared this with you before. One time we were going to a youth rally down the Tri-Cities, and a busload of Christians had come down from Canada, and I don't remember exactly who the name was of the youth minister, but the kids kept asking us because they were getting, rambunctious and anxious and all to get to the youth rally, and they said, well, where are we going, or where are we? And the youth minister was driving the bus would always yell out, we're going to heaven, and we're taking as many people as we can with us. And that's the attitude that we need to have every single day. We need to remind ourselves, hey, we're a Christian, and our job, even though it's not a job, quote unquote, is to take as many people as we can with us to heaven. We need to be thinking about that every day. How can we share our Christianity with others? How can we share Christ's love with the lost and bring them to Him? We need to always be doing that. But he said, here's the deal. If you want me to get you home safe, you must promise me that you'll obey my voice. He said, you can't see me, but I can see you. And he said, if you're not going to obey my voice, then you will die. When you can't see anything, you have no idea how disoriented that you've become. Finally, he said, okay, I found you. Now hear me clear. He said, you're 4 minutes from a mountain. He said, you're going to crash into that mountain and die. Brothers and sisters, just as Jesus told us in John 10, we need to listen to the voice of Jesus. We need to listen to what it is He has told us in the Scriptures. Because if we do not listen to His word and obey what He tells us, we will die. And I'm not talking just the physical death, because we're all going to face that probably, but the spiritual death by not listening to what God is telling us. Follow my voice. I never said, I have to follow your voice. Is that reasonable? You see, I understand that without His voice, I had nothing. This lawyer knows that without this voice from Anchorage, that he had nothing except for a plane that he didn't know how to fly. And he realized that he was going to crash if he did not listen to this stranger, if he did not listen to this voice, and he recognized it. And do you understand that without God's voice, you have nothing? Nothing at all. Finally, he got his turn, and he said that I'm freezing all the traffic in the area. He said it will take me an hour and a half to get you to Anchorage, and there's a lot of weather between you and Anchorage. You are in for a rough ride. And he said, I want you to hear me. I don't want you to look at what's going on outside. I don't want you to pay attention to the storm, just my voice. Remember the miracle we talked about here recently? About Jesus walking out on the water? And Peter saw Jesus walking, and he asked, let me join you? And he came and got on the water, and he started walking to Jesus. But what happened? He took his eyes off of Jesus, didn't he? And he looked out, and he saw the storm. Maybe the water was leaping up on his legs. And when he did that, he started sinking. And that's what this air traffic controller is telling this guy. Don't look out at the storm. You know, how many of us sit out and watch storms, especially when they're running up on us? Some people do. Some people like watching them. Okay. I see some heads shaking yes and some shaking no. But you get transfixed on that, especially when you're flying in a plane that you don't, or you're in a plane that you don't know how to fly. And you start looking around. We were up in Colorado one time, up at Pikes Peak, and we saw where lightning was being made. You know, it was just one of these things where it was boom, bam, boom, bam, and it was just, and we turned around and left and went another way because I didn't want to travel through that storm. You know, and that's what this air traffic controller is telling him. Don't look out in the storm. Listen to my voice and do what I tell you, and you will survive. He said, if you start watching the storm, you will die, but I will take you through it. Now, because they cleared all the traffic, several pilots, those nighttime freighters, those 747s, started talking to us. They said, we're praying for you, men. The air traffic controller said, you're going to make it, but listen to my voice. Listen to my voice. That's the key. He said, trust my voice. Do realize that your head is full of voices, and everybody in the world wants to talk to you, and everybody wants to be controlling you. And that's what we see in the world today, isn't it? All these preachers and all are getting up there and say, hey, don't listen to God, don't listen to scriptures, don't read the scriptures, listen to me, listen to what I have to tell you. No, we need to listen to God's voice. We need to listen to what God is telling us. We need to read His words in the Bible. That's what's going to save us, not what men tell you. Because we see so many examples out there today of where men are following men and their false teachings. And we've already studied about what's going to happen there. God says, I want you to be a living sacrifice. I want you to put yourself on the altar and let my voice be your voice. Finally, we went through the worst of the weather, but there was still more. And then the voice came back, and it said, now I'm going to line you up. He said, I'm going to bring you in right down the runway. And at the foot of the runway are some lights, and they're in the form of a cross. He said, don't you forget this. The cross is the way home. Finally, he's bringing us down. We can't see anything. And all he kept saying is, stay with me. My sheep, the Bible says, hear my voice, and they follow me. Finally, just a couple hundred feet off the ground, we saw the cross, and I landed the plane. In fact, I landed it 7 times. Finally, it all came to a stop, and the minute we stopped, the pilot woke up and asked, what is happening? The voice on the radio said, thanks for listening. I watch them crash and burn all the time because they won't follow my voice. They don't understand that I'm the one who can see them even when they can't see me. But they get the voices in their head and they kill themselves. They self-destruct. Thanks for listening to my voice. Then they put us in a motel room. At about 4 a.m, there was a knock at my door. I opened the door and a man was standing there and he said, hello, David. I said, you're the voice. You're the one who got me home. He said, I am. Do you understand one day you're going to stand before Him, before God, and say, you were the voice. You were the voice that brought me home. If you're not on that altar as a living sacrifice, your head's full of voices, and then we wonder why kids crash and burn. We wonder why marriages are shattered. And the Lord's saying, I'm the one who has the voice. All I can remember is that voice saying, stay with me. Stay with me. Don't listen to what's going on in your head, and don't watch the storm. Stay with me, and I'll take you through. Okay. Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. There it goes. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. If you want to be a Christian, then your body, who you are daily, must be a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. That is your reasonable service to God. How do you turn your body into a living sacrifice to God? We all know that what a living sacrifice is. And that's where a live animal is put on an altar and sacrificed and burnt alive. Okay? And of course, that's not what he's telling us that we need to do, but we need to be living while we're alive. We need to be a living sacrifice to God. That means we need to give up the worldly pleasures. We need to give up all the things that we want to do that are not Christ-like, that are not Christian-like. That's how we sacrifice our bodies daily for God, and how we are a living sacrifice. Verse 2, and you do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We as Christians have to be very careful that we do not fail, that we do not fall ourselves. We have to make sure that we do not conform to this world and the pleasures that surround us every day. And we talked about this morning in our lesson, in our class. We have to transform ourselves by renewing our lives, by reading the Bible and studying His Word. We must prove what is good and acceptable and perfect in the sight of God. Our Christian light must shine every day to everybody that we come in contact with. You never know when you might be that one person in that person's life that will share Christ with them. When you might be that shining light that they need at that moment in their lives. But how can we be that person if we've not letting our light shine? If we're not looking to how we can help people? That is what we need to do every day of our lives. Verse 9. Dropping down to verse 9. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. Here, the writer is telling us how we as Christians need to live our daily life. These are things that we need to do. We need to love without hypocrisy. We need to abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good, not what is evil. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor, giving preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoice in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer, distributing to the needs of the saints, and giving to hospitality. And we see this several times in the New Testament, talking about how we need to give preference to the believers. We need to help each other. We need to be there for each other. We need to be there. Not ignore, not get into our own little shell, and not worry about anything else that's going on. We do that with fellowshipping. We do that with talking to each other. We do that with being a part of everybody's life and letting people be a part of our life. You know, I've had people say, well, you know, nobody knew what I was going through. It's like, well, did you tell anybody? Nobody's going to know what's going on behind your four walls if you don't share it with people. Some people are really great at putting up a wall around them to where you can't tell that if anything's bothering them. But we need to be able to get through that and to see what is going on and to have the Christian love to say, hey, what's going on? Can I help you? Do you need help? And then you find out what's going on. Verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. Whoa. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Somebody's bad to you. Somebody's evil to you. Somebody constantly is writing you about this or that or whatever. Don't strike back. Love that person. Be nice to them. Verse 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And that's what we've just talked about, that we need to do as Christians. Verse 16, be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on things high, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Do not be wise in your own opinion. What is it that God tells us? That's what we need to be wise in and share that. Not, well, you know what, I think you ought to do this, or I think you ought to do that, and I think this is what's right, and this is what's wrong. Yeah. God's saying, don't be too high on your own opinion. Again, we talked about that again this morning in our lesson, in our class period. Verse 17, repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. And that's easy to do, isn't it? Repay evil for evil. Somebody mistreats you, mistreat them back. Somebody does something wrong to you, you do something wrong back. It's harder not to sometimes, isn't it? It's harder not to. But that's what we as Christians are supposed to do. We are not to repay anybody evil for evil. In verse 18, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with just those who are good and nice to you. No. Live peaceably with all men. There are going to be times, he says, if possible, as much as depends on you. There are going to be times where people it's just going to be really, really hard to. And you might have to ignore those people and get them out of your life. But as much as possible, live peaceably with all men. Verse 19, behold, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, and I love this verse, I live by this verse, I say this verse all the time, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Now I'm waiting for that day for him to seek vengeance on all these people who have done me wrong, because I've let it go. I've had to, because I'm a Christian, and I've got to live by these rules that have been set down to us as Christians. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay. Verse 20, therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. Yeah, that's what it says. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Again, we can't be evil to the person that's being evil to us. Not as a Christian. We have to live a different life. We have to live upside down compared to how the world is living. If our enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. If he's naked, give him clothing. Isn't that what Jesus said? When I was naked and thirsty and, hungry, you didn't do anything for me. Well, Father, when did we see you do this? When were you hungry and naked and thirsty? Well, when you saw the least of my people and you didn't do it to them, then you didn't do it to me. Jesus is saying, feed your enemy, give him something to drink, and heap coals of fire on his head. Verse 21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And we talked about this the last 4 weeks, dealing with the devil and not letting the devil in our life. We can't let the devil come in and reside. We can't practice evil like we have read. We cannot practice those evil things. We need to be a Christian and not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. We need to make sure that the voice that we listen to is from God. We need to let Him in our life. We need to follow His direction every day. We need to make sure that we're living that good and faithful Christian life. And by doing that, we've got to treat our enemies fairly. We've got to treat our enemies nice. And that's not easy from a worldly standpoint, because that's not how the world says. Do them before they do unto you. But that's not the Christian way. We've got to do different. We've got to live different. We've got to live differently. We've got to be different. We've got to stand out, because that's what Christians do. But remember, listen to the right voice. Read scriptures and understand what that voice is, what that voice is telling you. Know right from wrong. And you do that by reading the scriptures. If there's any way that we can help you this morning, let us know. Let us be there for you. Let us help you through your problems. Let us help you deal with people if you need that.